In 1637, a sailor mistook a priceless tulip bulb for an onion and ate it. He was thrown in prison. Chimney sweeps gambled their life savings on flowers. When the bubble burst, merchants threw themselves into canals. The Dutch economy was destroyed for a generation. There's just one problem. Almost none of that is true. Historian Anne Goldgar spent years digging through Dutch archives looking for the victims of tulip mania. She found exactly 37 people who paid significant sums for tulips. 37. In the entire country. And bankruptcies. Quote, "I couldn't find anybody who went bankrupt." The sailor story? Propaganda. The chimney sweeps? Never happened. Those dramatic tales come from satirical Calvinist pamphlets warning against greed. It's not history. It's a 400-year-old morality tale that we've been repeating as fact. So if tulip mania wasn't the catastrophe we've been told, why does it matter? Because the real lesson isn't about tulips. It's about what happens when an entire nation builds its wealth on the assumption that prices only go up. When financial innovation outruns social trust. When paper promises detach from physical reality. And right now, the Netherlands is doing it again. Not with flowers, with something far more dangerous. Their homes, their pensions, and their entire economic foundation. On paper, the Netherlands is a dream. The world's #1 pension system, according to Mercer. AAA credit ratings from every agency. Government debt at just 43% of GDP. That's half the European average. A trade powerhouse, a tech leader. Home to ASML, the only company on Earth that can make the machines that make advanced semiconductors. Everything a developed nation should be. But here's the Dutch paradox. This wealthy, sensible nation has households drowning in debt. Dutch household debt to GDP, 93.9%. The Eurozone average, 54%. Let that sink in. Dutch households carry nearly double the debt of the average European household. 60% of Dutch citizens have a mortgage. That's the highest rate in Europe. Not Greece, not Spain, the Netherlands. Total mortgage debt, 851 billion euros, and climbing. Now look at the math. Since 2015, Dutch house prices are up 110%. Wages, up 40%. That's a 70 percentage point gap between what homes cost and what people earn. Young buyers now fall short by an average of 120,000 euros just to afford an average home. Home ownership among people under 35 has dropped from 40% in 2008 to 31% today. An entire generation locked out. How can a country be so rich and so leveraged at the same time? The answer lies in understanding the modern Dutch tulip, real estate. But to understand why this is dangerous, truly dangerous, you first need to understand what actually happened in 1637, and why the truth is more useful than the myth. Here's the truth about tulip mania, and it's stranger than the myth. The most valuable tulips, the ones with those stunning red and white stripes that collectors went crazy for, were infected with a disease, the tulip-breaking virus, transmitted by aphids. It's what created those beautiful patterns. But here's the thing, the virus also weakened the bulbs, reduced their offspring, and eventually killed the entire genetic line. The most expensive tulips in history were literally dying. Built-in scarcity. The more beautiful, the more doomed. Now, the Dutch were traders, the best in the world at the time, and they invented something revolutionary to trade these bulbs. Futures contracts. You could buy a tulip bulb that was still buried in frozen winter ground. By weight, in fractions of a gram. No margin requirements, no mark to market. Contracts changed hands in tavern backrooms without the bulb ever moving. They called it wind handle, wind trade. You were trading wind, promises, paper. Sound familiar? And here's what the myth gets wrong about who was buying. This wasn't chimney sweeps gambling their savings. Anne Goldgar found it was primarily wealthy merchants and textile traders, connected families, Mennonite religious communities. About 37 documented buyers paid truly extraordinary prices. The frenzy in common bulb varieties? It lasted roughly 1 month, February 16th, 1637. Then came the crash. February 3rd, 1637. An auction house in Haarlem. The auctioneer lowered prices. No bids. Lowered them again. Silence. Within 48 hours, the market ceased to exist. But here's what most people don't know. The economic damage? Minimal. The Dutch Golden Age continued for another century. Amsterdam remained the financial capital of Europe. The real damage was social. Dutch mercantile society ran on honor, handshake deals. Your word was your bond. When buyers universally said, "I don't care what I promised, I'm not paying," they shattered the trust underlying all commerce. Courts refused to enforce the contracts. They weren't sure they were even legal. Buyers eventually settled for 3.5% of original prices. 3.5%. So Tulip Mania wasn't about economic collapse. It was about what happens when financial innovation outpaces social trust. When paper promises detach from physical reality. When an entire market operates on the assumption that someone else will always pay more. Now look at modern Dutch real estate. The numbers are staggering. Average Dutch home price as of November 2025, €477,000. Amsterdam, 632,000 to nearly 700,000 euros. Central Amsterdam, over 10,000 euros per square metre. At the peak in December 2021, Dutch house prices were rising 20% per year. 20% in a single year. They've cooled since then. Current growth is around 6 to 7% annually. But here's the thing. Wages aren't growing 6 to 7%. So every year, the gap widens. Young buyers now fall short by an average of 120,000 euros to afford an average home. Home ownership among people under 35 has dropped from 40% in 2008 to 31% in 2024. Do the math. That's nearly a quarter of young homeowners, gone from the market in 15 years. But prices are only half the story. The real danger is how the Dutch buy their homes. Here's something most people completely miss. Between 44 and 55% of all Dutch mortgages are what's called a flossingsvrije hypotheek, interest-only mortgages. You pay the bank every single month, but your debt? It never goes down, not by €1. You're paying rent to the bank, hoping your house will be worth more when the bill finally comes due. That's 374 to 468 billion euros in loans where the principal never decreases. Let that sink in. Nearly €500 billion in mortgages where homeowners aren't building any equity. They're just paying to borrow. These mortgages have 30-year terms. The ones taken out in the early 2000s? They mature in the mid-2030s. That's not some distant future. That's less than a decade away. The clock is ticking. Now you might be thinking, how did this happen? Why would anyone design a system like this? The answer is, the Dutch government made it incredibly attractive to maximize debt. Mortgage interest deduction, called hypotheekrenteaftrek, costs Dutch taxpayers €8.9 billion every single year. The government literally pays you to take on debt. The Netherlands is the only country in Europe that allows 100% loan-to-value mortgages. Everywhere else caps it at 90% or less. In the Netherlands, you can borrow the entire purchase price. No down payment required. Borrowing limits? Up to 5.5 times your annual salary. The OECD calculated that Dutch housing subsidies equal 1.2% of GDP. That's 3 times Sweden, 6 times Luxembourg. The European Commission has told the Netherlands 5 times to reduce these incentives for debt-financed home ownership. 5 times. The Dutch government has essentially said, thanks for the advice. The system is designed to maximize debt, and for decades it worked, because interest rates were near zero and prices only went up. But this isn't new, and that's what makes it terrifying. The Netherlands has been here before. You might think this is a one-time problem, a modern issue, something unique to the 21st century. It's not. The Netherlands has a 400-year addiction to debt-fueled bubbles. 1637. Tulip Mania. You know the story now. The real one. Financial innovation outran social trust. Markets collapsed, not from economic damage, but from broken promises. 1720. The Windhandel Bubble. Simultaneous with the South Sea Bubble in Britain and the Mississippi Bubble in France, the Dutch forgot their own lessons within a single century. 1978 to 1982. The housing collapse. Real house prices fell 70%. 70%. The IMF documented what they called a vicious circle. Falling prices led to reduced consumption. Reduced consumption deepened the recession. The recession pushed prices down further. Private consumption fell for 2 consecutive years. The Dutch economy didn't fully recover for nearly a decade. 2008 to 2013. The mortgage crisis. 25 to 30% of all Dutch mortgages were underwater. That's over 1 million households owing more than their homes were worth. But here's the number that should terrify you. Among homeowners under 40, 60% had negative equity. Among 25 to 30-year-olds, 75%. 3 out of 4 young homeowners owed more than their house was worth. ING received a €10 billion government injection. ABN AMRO cost taxpayers €21.7 billion in nationalisation, with a net loss of €6.7 billion. SNS Bank was nationalised outright. Shareholders were wiped out completely. This was 15 years ago. Memory is short. Every generation the same pattern. Prices rise, debt accumulates. Everyone believes it's different this time. Then it isn't. So what's different now? What's the trigger that makes this moment uniquely dangerous? If you're enjoying this cheerful breakdown of Dutch economic vulnerabilities, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that someone out there appreciates learning why wealthy nations might be one interest rate hike away from disaster. For over a decade, this mountain of debt was manageable for one simple reason. Interest rates were essentially zero. When you're paying 1 or 2% on your mortgage, even a massive debt is serviceable. Monthly payments stay affordable. The system keeps working. That era is over. New mortgage rates in the Netherlands went from 1.6% in December 2021 to over 4.3% by December 2023. That's nearly triple. And because Dutch households are more leveraged than almost anyone else in Europe, ECB rate hikes hit the Netherlands harder than most Eurozone countries. The Dutch central bank, De Nederlandsche Bank, has quantified exactly how sensitive Dutch home prices are to interest rates. For every 1 percentage point increase in mortgage rates, house prices fall between 5.2 and 8.6%. Every single percentage point. We already saw a preview. When rates spiked in 2022 and 2023, Dutch house prices fell 5.8% nationally. Amsterdam and Utrecht dropped over 8%. Then, something interesting happened. Prices recovered. By November 2025, they're 14.9% above the July 2022 peak. The correction proved the market's sensitivity to rates. The recovery proved how much pent-up demand exists. Both are warning signs. But here's the crucial detail most analysis misses. Most Dutch mortgages are fixed for 10 or more years. The full impact of these rate changes won't be felt until 2025 through 2028, as those fixed periods expire and homeowners refinance at the new, higher rates. Add the interest-only mortgages from the early 2000s, maturing in the mid-2030s, and you've got a delayed fuse. The bomb is built, the fuse is lit. But the explosion hasn't happened yet. The IMF's assessment is blunt. Quote, "A severe correction in the housing market could trigger a recession. Rising rates are the trigger. But the bullet has multiple chambers. The Dutch economy isn't fragile in just one way. It's fragile in 4 ways simultaneously. Housing is just the beginning. the Netherlands has structural cracks running through its entire economic foundation. 4 pillars, each one under stress. The Netherlands built its modern welfare state on a gas field. The Groningen field, discovered in 1959, was one of the largest natural gas deposits ever found in Europe. At its peak, it generated up to 15 billion euros annually for the Dutch government. Total extraction since the 1960s? 363 billion euros. That money built schools, hospitals, the social safety net that makes the Netherlands what it is today. But extraction came at a cost. Over 1,600 earthquakes caused by gas extraction, tens of thousands of homes damaged, more than 3,000 buildings demolished entirely. Following a parliamentary inquiry that declared a debt of honour to the region, production ceased on October 1, 2023. 22 billion euros committed for regional recovery. And here's the twist that will make your blood boil. Shell and ExxonMobil, the companies that operated the field, are secretly suing the Dutch government through international arbitration for billions of euros in lost future profits. The companies that caused the earthquakes want compensation for being stopped from causing more. The Netherlands went from net gas exporter to net importer overnight. And here's the problem. 90 to 95% of Dutch buildings are still heated by natural gas. That's 7.7 million homes that need to transition to something else. But they can't build the alternatives because of another crisis. The Netherlands has Europe's highest nitrogen emissions per hectare, double the EU average. 46% comes from agriculture. The Dutch agricultural sector is incredibly productive, but incredibly polluting. In May 2019, the Dutch Council of State made a ruling that changed everything. They invalidated the government's emissions framework, said it wasn't compliant with EU nature protection laws. Overnight, 14 billion euros in construction projects froze. Building permits stopped being issued. The government proposed buying out farmers. 25 billion euros budgeted. The response? Massive protests. Tractors blocking highways. And in the 2023 provincial elections, the Boer-Burger-Beweging, the farmer-citizen movement, won the most seats in every single province. A party that didn't exist 4 years earlier now dominates Dutch regional politics. Policy paralysis continues. Here's the brutal math. The Netherlands has a housing shortage of nearly 400,000 homes. But they can't build because of nitrogen regulations. You can't solve a housing shortage if you can't build. Now let's talk about something most people don't realize. One Dutch company holds a 100% global monopoly on the machines needed to make advanced semiconductors, ASML. Their EUV lithography systems cost over $350 million each. There is no alternative supplier anywhere on Earth. Every advanced chip in your phone, your computer, your car depends on machines only ASML can make. 28.3 billion euros in 2024 sales. Around 44,000 employees, half of them in the Netherlands. This is the crown jewel of Dutch industry. But here's the vulnerability. China represented 36% of ASML's 2024 revenue, 10.2 billion euros. Then came US export controls. Washington told the Netherlands, stop selling advanced machines to China. That 36% is dropping to around 20% in 2025. Billions in revenue, gone. When ASML's Q3 2024 bookings disappointed expectations, the stock dropped 16% in a single day. 16%, one day. Dutch intelligence has identified China as the greatest threat to Dutch economic security, with ASML as a prime target for espionage and IP theft. The company is caught between superpowers, and so is the Dutch economy. Finally, the fourth pillar. The Dutch pension system holds nearly 2 trillion euros. That's Europe's largest. It's been the envy of the world, ranked number 1 by Mercer's Global Index. But right now, it's going through the biggest transition in its history. A mandatory shift from defined benefit to defined contribution. Deadline 2028. In simple terms, the old system guaranteed you a specific retirement income. The new system says, here's a pot of money, good luck with the markets. This transition requires massive unwinding of interest rate swaps, complex financial instruments the funds use to hedge their obligations. Hedge funds are already positioning to profit from the volatility this could create. One pension expert put it bluntly, quote, "Volatility could emerge if multiple funds reduce their interest rate hedges simultaneously. 2 trillion euros, moving at the same time. What could go wrong?" And there's a generational time bomb here too. Older members have their benefits largely secured. Younger workers? They're moving to a system where their retirement depends on market returns they can't control. In 2019, tens of thousands of Dutch workers went on strike to protest pension age increases. The system that was supposed to guarantee retirement security has become a source of uncertainty. Housing, energy, tech, pensions. 4 pillars, each with cracks. So why hasn't this all collapsed already? Why have the bears been wrong?
Here's what's fair to say. People have been predicting a Dutch housing crash for years, maybe decades. They've been wrong. Why? First, the housing shortage is real. The Netherlands lacks somewhere between 396,000 and 430,000 homes. That's about 5% of the total housing stock. Government targets of 100,000 new homes per year? Not achievable until 2027 at the earliest. In 2024, they completed only 69,000. This isn't speculative excess like Spain in 2008, where they built millions of homes nobody wanted. This is genuine structural deficit, real demand, real people who need places to live. Second, Dutch institutions are genuinely strong. Number 9 globally on corruption perception. Number 1 pension system ranking. 43% government debt to GDP. That's massive fiscal space if a crisis hits. AAA credit ratings from every agency. These aren't fake strengths, they're real. Third, Dutch households have actually improved since 2008. Mortgage debt relative to disposable income fell from 257% to 179%, between 2011 and 2023. 95% of Dutch households save regularly. Most mortgages are fixed for 10 or more years, protecting against rate shocks. And default rates? 0.05 to 0.15%, among the lowest in Europe. Dutch people pay their mortgages. Fourth, the labour market is exceptional. Unemployment sits at 3.7 to 4%. In the first quarter of 2024, wages grew 6.6%, the largest increase in over 40 years. People have jobs, they're getting raises, bills get paid. All of this is true. The Netherlands has real strengths that other bubble economies lacked. Spain didn't have a housing shortage. Greece didn't have AAA ratings. Ireland didn't have the world's best pension system. The bears have been wrong because the fundamentals, in many ways, are sound. But here's what the bulls miss. The Netherlands isn't fragile in one way. It's fragile in every way simultaneously. A housing market where prices have outpaced wages by 70 percentage points, built on 374 to 468 billion euros in interest-only mortgages with maturities approaching, held by households carrying nearly double the European average debt, in an economy that just lost its primary energy source, that can't build new housing because of nitrogen regulations, with a 2 trillion euro pension system in mid-transition and a tech sector dependent on one company caught between superpowers. Listen to what the experts are saying. The IMF. A severe correction in the housing market could trigger a recession. The European Systemic Risk Board. Netherlands is only partially compliant with housing risk recommendations. De Nederlandsche Bank. The outlook for financial stability has deteriorated. The European Commission has warned the Netherlands 5 times, to reduce incentives for debt-financed home ownership. Each pillar has a crack. The question isn't whether vulnerabilities exist. The question is which one breaks first, and whether the others can hold. We don't have to guess what a Dutch housing crash looks like. We've seen it before. 2009 to 2013.
Here's how the sequence unfolds. Interest-only mortgages become unaffordable as fixed periods expire and homeowners refinance at higher rates. Payments jump 30, 40, 50%. Forced selling begins at the margins. The people who can't make the new payments, the divorces, the job losses, prices start falling. And when prices fall, negative equity spreads. In 2009, 25 to 30% of Dutch mortgages went underwater. Over 1 million households owing more than their homes were worth. Among young homeowners, 75%. Now imagine that again, but with nearly double the mortgage debt, with interest-only loans that never built equity, with a pension system in transition and an energy infrastructure that needs complete overhaul. Consumer spending freezes. Who buys furniture when their house is worth less than their mortgage? Who renovates? Who takes vacations? The vicious circle the IMF documented in the 1980s repeats. The banking sector, with 21% of assets in mortgages, the highest in the Eurozone, faces stress. But here's what's different from 2008. The Dutch government has fiscal space. 43% debt to GDP leaves room to respond. They can bail out. They can stimulate. They can act. And unlike Spain, there's genuine housing shortage, not speculative oversupply. When prices fall, pent-up demand eventually returns. The crash, if it comes, would be severe, but potentially containable. The question is whether that's reassuring or terrifying. In 1637, the damage from tulip mania wasn't economic. The Dutch Golden Age continued for another century. Amsterdam remained the financial capital of Europe. Trade flourished. The damage was social, a crisis of trust. When promises stopped meaning anything, when honor-based commerce shattered, when buyers universally said, "I don't care what I agreed to, I'm not paying." Today's Netherlands has made a different kind of promise, that 8.9 billion euros in annual mortgage subsidies will continue, that 100% financing is safe, that interest rates won't rise, or if they do, prices will rise faster, that the housing shortage means prices can only go up, that 2 trillion euros in pensions will be there when you retire, that ASML will navigate between superpowers, that somehow 7.7 million gas-heated homes will transition smoothly. These are all reasonable assumptions, individually. Collectively, they're a bet that nothing goes wrong at the same time. The tulip trap isn't about tulips. It's about what happens when a nation builds its prosperity on the assumption that today's conditions last forever. The Dutch invented modern finance. They gave the world its first stock exchange, its first central bank, its first multinational corporation, and its first speculative bubble. 400 years later, they're proving that even the most sophisticated economies can forget their own lessons. The question isn't whether the Dutch economy has vulnerabilities. It does. The question is whether the country that survived tulip mania, the VOC's collapse, and the 2008 crisis has the institutional strength to survive what's coming, or whether this time the tulip trap finally closes. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your prediction in the comments. Does the Netherlands navigate this, or does the tulip trap finally close? And be specific. Which pillar do you think breaks first? Housing, energy, pensions, ASML, or do the institutions hold? If you want to stay ahead of the next economic time bomb, hit subscribe. We break down these hidden vulnerabilities before they become headlines.